Welcome to Transform Now, the podcast brought to you by robotic process automation pioneer SS&C Blue Prism. Digital transformation has the potential to reshape the way companies service their customers, engage their employees, and manage their operations. Whether you're looking to develop strategies, tactics, or best practices to positively impact the future of work, or you're curious to see how other companies have successfully navigated their digital transformation programs, then this podcast is for you. We're here to help you transform now.
Hello, everyone. I'm Brad Hairston with SS&C Blue Prism. Welcome to the Transform Now podcast. Today, I'm excited to have as my guest Neil Murphy, the Chief Sales Officer at ABBYY, an intelligent document processing provider and a Blue Prism Technology Alliance partner. Today, Neil and I will be talking about how IDP is transforming data from business-critical documents into intelligent, actionable outcomes. Well, welcome, Neil. Appreciate you being here on the podcast. Why don't you start us off with an introduction?
Thanks, Brad. I'm very pleased to be here. I've been at ABBYY now for 7 years and spanned multiple different roles across the company and really been here during a big part of our success. So great place to be, but a lot of exposure to all the different markets around the world, as well as the different technology markets that we exist in across whether it's RPA or other automation areas. So my role, as it stands today, is, as it says, Chief Sales Officer, but ultimately being responsible for all of our revenue across the globe. And we're mainly a subscription business. So, goal to us is anything to do with annual recurring revenue. We have a fairly strong team across all the different regions, just over 100 people in sales capacities. So keeps me very busy in the mornings with Asia, during the day with Europe, and late in the day with our US teams.
Well, it's great to have you here today, Neil. ABBYY, as you know, is one of Blue Prism's longest standing technology partners. And it's a relationship that has certainly changed over time, with process mining being a really good example of that. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But today we're going to focus on the very important topic of intelligent document processing, which is one of the most common starting points for companies that are looking to advance their automation capability and move from basic RPA over into the intelligent automation realm. So ABBYY was founded way back in 1989, before the internet, before cell phones, before a lot of things, before RPA for that matter.
Yep.
Can you talk about the origins of the company and then how it has evolved over the last 34 years?
Yeah, because sometimes when you talk about origins of companies, it can be a very different company today than what it has been over 30 years ago. But I think we've got quite a connected story. So we were actually founded in 1989 by a gentleman called David Yang. And David set up what was ABBYY, or would become to be known as ABBYY, while he was actually at university. And that originally was all existed around translation. So while 34 years ago sounds like a long time ago, but then it was like really cutting edge. So he created an electronic language translation dictionary, basically. And part of his challenge was learning other languages. And that's what really spurred him to try and find and build a solution to help back then. And as you said, we didn't have the internet or Google Translate or anything at this point. So it was kind of ahead of its time. And that was super successful as a business to consumer offering at that point. And there's still people around the world still use copies of variations of that original software even today. So that was our kind of origins, as understanding kind of language. And you can kind of see more natural next steps to then, okay, what about language and words on a page? And then 93, I think it was, we then moved into the OCR market. Now, we weren't the first, but I'd say we were the first company to really move into it in a serious capacity of thinking around business solutions. So it was that point we produced FineReader Desktop, or what is now known as FineReader Desktop, and it's been a very well-recognized product. Again, around the world, we have over 100 million different users using that product. Again, it's a consumer type app that they use on their desktop to help understand documents, make them searchable, editable, and so on. So that was really kind of the origins as a finding solutions to consumer type of common needs. But it wasn't until I think it was 1996 that we moved into what would eventually become known as IDP. So while you mentioned like RPA has come obviously a lot later, but for us it's an interesting journey because IDP as a concept really didn't get mass following and understanding of the benefits, etc., until really things like RPA really became kind of its amplifier of the need for things like IDP. So it's always interesting, kind of sobering to think actually bringing these type of solutions way back at the end of the 90s. And okay, then it was a bit more rudimentary of looking for very fixed zones on a document, on an electronic document to extract a bit of data. But the beginnings and the basics of IDP were there then. So it's really since then we've developed our products and solutions around IDPs that become much more dynamic. Things like AI, machine learning are all built in now and become much more attributable to many, many different use cases. And whenever I've got up in front of kind of new customers or those customers that really understand RPA and intelligent automation, for a lot of them, they think actually IDP is new technology too. And in many cases, the way it's applied is new, but
Right.
actually this technology dates back a long, long time. And that's one of the first things that helps us in the market, that we're
Mhm.
well known, we're a well-respected brand, but we've been doing this a long time. It's only really in the last 5, 6 years that becomes much more mainstream.
That's really interesting. Why is IDP, in your opinion, an essential capability in today's organization?
It's purely, and this is kind of a good thing, but there's still a lot out there to automate. But when you think about almost any process you're involved in internally in a company, dealing with another company as a consumer, there's always documents as part of that, not necessarily physical documents anymore, which used to be the big driver behind our type of technology, but just the sheer amount of electronic documents as well as paper documents that form part of a process. And I think there's been this gradual realization that, okay, in the intelligent automation market, things like RPA vendors like Blue Prism have come up with great platforms, but then realized actually one of the most common challenges in any process or most processes that you look to automate is there's usually documents and volumes of documents as part of those processes somewhere during that process's journey throughout the organization. And that was well recognized as the main bottleneck to really delivering cognitive type of automation into an enterprise. And I'll just, a story even this week, my flight was delayed coming back from kind of a long weekend away, and there's a problem with the air conditioning unit. And part of the delay, or a big part of the delay, was just the time it took them to get the paperwork then in place, signed off by the pilot, and this is just an everyday occurrence, but this is happening every single day in the airline industry. And while it's not a focus use case for us, it just gives you an
Right.
example of things you don't even think about. Also go wrong with airplanes, have documents attached to them. And you
Mhm.
think, how are we going to, surely this can all be automated and done quicker. But at the end of the day, it's a worker coming out of the airplane with a bit of paper that the pilot's got to fill out and sign off on. And this is manual effort. And so no matter what we do in terms of trying to automate different parts of businesses, physical and electronic documents are a huge part of almost all processes that we're involved in today. And unless that part is addressed and addressed in a way that is scalable across a business, RPA, BPM, other automation type of projects, without that, can only ever reach so far in terms of depth of automation for that organization.
McKinsey did a study last year, a survey of number of companies that are heavily investing in automation, and they
Yeah.
found that most of those companies were using multiple technologies. The most pervasive technology in the automation space that companies are using, they found, was IDP. So that was interesting to me. RPA was, I think, second, but IDP can be found at most organizations, but maybe they're not using it as widely as they should. So how do
Right.
you differentiate as a leader in this IDP space, Neil?
Yeah, well, part of it's addressed to what you just talked about. So it's the same experience that we have, that most organizations have are using IDP. Almost all organizations will be using IDP in some form or format across the organization. Maybe it's focused in a particular department. Maybe it's not enterprise. For some, it really is across the enterprise. And that thereby is kind of one of our main differentiators. So we talked about how important IDP is now to really recognize the breadth of intelligent automation or to help drive its success. But then the problem is a client is not going to want to have to build an IDP model for different types of documents in multiple different platforms. So when they try and do this, invariably, they then just have pockets of success because maybe one organization is using Blue Prism, another organization is maybe using the BPM tool, and then it becomes really difficult to then apply different IDP methodologies across multiple different platforms. And this is where one of the differentiations with ABBYY is because we started so long ago and have already built up a lot of expertise across multiple different platforms, whether it's RPA, BPM, or other automation tools. Our solutions fit and work across all of those. Or if we don't have it connected to it already, it's very simple to go and build one because that's kind of our ethos of knowing that our technology and the success of it always depends on how it is used with other technologies. So that's how we build it ground up to make sure it's easily embeddable or used alongside other solutions. So that is one reason, but then really making it much easier to use. This isn't when I talk about we introduced it back in 96. Technology's moved on a lot since then. Then it was very complex. And now the real goal of implementing our technology is to make it as simple as possible for everyone to use. So you don't have to be a developer to go and drive IDP automations.
Speaking of that, I've read that ABBYY is built for the citizen developer. Can you elaborate on that?
I mean, it's good. We're focused on the citizen developers, the business units out there. As I just talked about, we don't want our technology limited to only being used by a developer because it's going to curtail the amount of automation that you can drive through our technology. Our latest offering, ABBYY Vantage, is really built in mind of users that are not experts in automating documents, but they're experts in understanding the business process and what they're looking to achieve. So we make it as achievable for them as possible as a citizen developer to go and build their own automations. But having said that, a big part of ABBYY's background as well is toolkits, providing OCR capabilities to build into other platforms. So we have a huge developer base that also really wants to get into the depths of our solutions and integrate them deeply into their own line of business applications. So we speak to both the developer community and the business user community for depending on what their aim is, what they're looking to achieve with our technology. But for sure, for citizen developers, everything that we produce now using machine learning and AI, which is not just new for us, it's been developed over many years, is to set it up in a way that they can build these automations again without being an expert in our technology.
Neil, I know that part of your value proposition is providing some cognitive services that are available, reusable through what you call the ABBYY Marketplace. Talk about that, and maybe could you provide an example or two of a consumable skill that your customer base can access through that?
Yeah. So Blue Prism was one of the organizations to really lead with that type of concept early on. And a skill for us is we have a production ready skills, which are really pre-built, pre-trained skills that understand certain use cases, or for example, certain document types like invoices or could be IDs or purchase orders, but it already is trained with many thousands of examples of documents and taught how to understand them, how to understand the difference between a purchase order or an invoice, and how to extract the relevant features of that document or table or so on and so on. So the idea being that a user can just load a sample document in and from day one extract pretty high level of result before they have to do any further training with it. So this is our idea of a production ready skill that can be consumed, and our marketplace is a way to advertise those and make it easily findable of what type of skills we have for what use cases and what document types. So this is all part of our vision from early on, that we want there to be many thousands of pre-trained skills that exist either as ABBYY has created, or the partner community that exists around us, or the kind of developer community as users who are using our products can create and post on the marketplace. This shouldn't be limited, that people have to go and build it from scratch every single time. The nice thing with IDP is there's a huge amount of variation in different use cases and document types, but they also are very common across many, many organizations. So for many of those documents, once it's trained and done once, it can be applied with general applicability across a huge number of organizations. So this is what we try to drive with our marketplace, to bring that ecosystem of developers, partners, and other vendors together to make this much more interchangeable and beneficial to the wider community.
Yeah, that's fantastic. One of the skills that you mentioned there was an ID skill. And I'd like to drill into that one a little bit more, because know your customer is such an incredibly important area of focus, especially in financial services, but also other industries. So can you talk about specifically what ABBYY does in this space with the ID skill? I think that would be fascinating to hear about.
Yep. Yeah. And I think it's important to differentiate here, because you'll hear for a lot of IDP providers, when you create an ID type of model to extract data from, it's not that hard to create a basic model to extract data from one type of ID, like a driving license in the US, for example. But as soon as you bring variation into that and different regions of driving licenses, then other types of IDs like passports or other identification cards in other regions, this is really, really hard then to have something that is applicable on a wide basis. And this is where we focus with our ID skill. So like we talked about a second ago with production-ready pre-trained skills, our ID skill is a good example of one of those. So it's already trained with over 10,000 different types of IDs, and then many, many more thousands of samples to train those. So again, when you're looking to build out a KYC process, you shouldn't be sitting there worrying about, okay, do I need to build a model for this type of ID, that type of ID? Just use the ID skill. It's already trained on almost any type of ID you can think of, and you're able to then do your own training on top of this. So this is our ID skill, and obviously KYC is a very popular use case that will be used for. We have then others who are purely might be access to events. They want to use a mobile app and call our ID skill that this person really is who they say they are. There's a lot of different use cases that the ID skill is then applied to. But this is a great example of what can be achieved with the type of machine learning capabilities we have in the Vantage platform.
That's really, really interesting, Neil. And I'd like to shift now over to healthcare, another industry that has too much paper. I visited a doctor this week and I saw the folder of forms and information they had on me from only a few visits. I was blown away. So healthcare is still digging out from a mound of paperwork. Can you talk about what ABBYY's been able to do in the healthcare sector specifically?
Yeah, particularly in the US. So healthcare is one of our main verticals that we focus on through sales specialism and marketing and go to market. But to just understand some of the background, talk about some of our toolkits and how we built up our business over the many years we've been in place. But a lot of the different healthcare providers are already using ABBYY capabilities that they built into their own software platforms. So already there's things like from the different patient systems already have some of our technology built into them from an OCR level. So that has already kind of given us a foothold in that market. And of course, the natural progression of that is, okay, well, how do we take this to the next level and really embrace IDP beyond just kind of OCR that we already have? So that has been a huge success, but the main use cases are the obvious ones for patient onboarding and claims that then come on the back of that, particularly against the US market. But we also had another large investment in ABBYY technology for IDP from another US healthcare organization recently. And that was all to do with the pharma manufacturing process and all of the documents that go along when they're manufacturing new drugs and how they're signed off, all the research that goes into it. And you can imagine it's a documentation heavy process to get those approved. But the quicker they're approved, they go through this process, the quicker they get drugs out into the healthcare market. So there's a lot of different use cases that we're applied to. But yeah, as I said, it's one of our main successes, particularly in the US market, and one that we see over the next couple of years. And thinking about some of the projects we have ongoing right now, it's one of our main growth areas, again, as a key vertical.
Neil, at the beginning of the podcast, I mentioned that Blue Prism and ABBYY have partnered for quite some time. In your own words, how are Blue Prism and ABBYY better together?
We talk about a lot of different things we've already done. For Blue Prism, I think there's a great recognition and understanding of its customers and some of the limitations they have, and that some of these have already invested in ABBYY technology. Bringing those two conversations together is always going to be much more beneficial than having these conversations in silo. And I can think of several examples like this, but before I go to an example, I think our mantra is always to have best of breed. And when you're talking about IDP, it can start as some people think, it's a tick in the box and, they've got a technology to apply to that particular area. Then they realize just how complex all the different use cases are and how hard it can be if you don't have the right vendor strategy to really get the kind of straight through processing or accuracy that you want to achieve. So our point is always to partner with the best technology. And when Blue Prism work with us, they should know they're bringing in the best that there is in the market for IDP. And could another vendor maybe achieve certain things? Yeah, maybe they could. But do other vendors have the history and the knowledge of the different use cases and the time that ABBYY has had to build our capabilities around that? Then there's not really anyone else that exists in the market in that kind of unique position. So for us, it's always about best of breed and bringing that together. We've seen that success, particularly in accounts like Zurich, which we've talked about, so Zurich Insurance, which we've talked about publicly in the past. And actually, even the main lead for Zurich Insurance did a joint webinar with both companies, and we're able to quote him. They'd already built a lot of their automation around Blue Prism at the time. And the reason that they had chosen ABBYY at that point was exactly what I've just talked about, of having the best of breed, that they wanted to make sure that their investments were based on proven technology where both technologies are already working together and that we could show success. And that really helped us in the likes of Zurich to then join our forces together, better understand some of the use cases and challenges that Zurich had to finally to having a very successful implementation and growing customer today.
That's great. Well, we would be remiss if we didn't talk about process mining, such a big step change in the industry. In 2021, Blue Prism announced an OEM relationship with ABBYY with your Timeline product, which enables process and task mining within the Blue Prism platform. In addition to providing a fact-based, data-driven methodology for finding the next best automations, ABBYY Timeline has also been tightly integrated with Blue Prism so that when processes are identified to be automated, you can fast track those into the Blue Prism platform and create a skeleton automation. And so it accelerates the development process pretty significantly. How has process intelligence, in your opinion, revolutionized the world of intelligent automation?
I think actually there's two things. So even before we get to the topic of automation, if you think about the partners out there, big four consultancies, when they're going to an enterprise talking about transformational projects, they're not necessarily starting with what are the processes we can go and automate. It starts with the process and better understanding what the organization is looking to achieve and the processes that exist in that organization that are maybe the barriers from really recognizing a true digital transformation of that process. And this is kind of our view as well. Look, always start with understanding the business and the process first. And that then helps drive what those improvements may be. It may be that actually automation of this particular process is not the right first step. Re-engineering of the process is the right step because through BPPI, in this case, as the process mining platform from ABBYY, helps an organization better understand what's actually happening in the first place before they even get to the point around automation. So taking that step, it's much more high level strategic view in an enterprise that you're actually looking to help them benefit and improve as a business, not just trying to find additional tasks or processes to automate. And that for us is where to start the conversation, because it won't always be the right thing to automate. If you're trying to automate a badly executed process, then, what's the point? But we have seen that elsewhere in the market where other organizations have just tried to put automation where maybe it's not the right fit in the first place. For us, that's the first step to really make sure that this technology is applied in the right way and the start conversations at the right level. Then once you've gone through that step, the next step, is what are the next processes to go to and automate? Is it really at the full end-to-end process level, or is that a real task level at the desktop? So this is when, of course, what we're particularly interested in, especially because it now drives for you guys more actual automations and drives use cases for us around things like IDP. So now we get away from just automating processes blindly without knowing how that actually impacts the organization. Now through deploying process mining and task mining, we have a much better view of how that's actually going to be impacted by automation, and before we can get there, which are the processes to actually go for in the first place. So that for us, if you think, go back 5-6 years, most organizations were not taking that approach. It was just lowest hanging fruit, which process to go after and go and automate. So it's been a very kind of iterative learning process. But now, best process is to take that approach of understand the process, then deciding which are the best candidates to go after. And they're the two big areas that I think we've impacted together, and that Blue Prism now brings uniquely to the market against all of its competitors. So, that now serves up the next few years of ready-made understanding of what to really go after and hunt as improvements in the business.
Something else ABBYY Timeline does well is quantify the processes that exist today within organizations. How much does it cost a company every time they process an invoice or generate a purchase order, for example, so that you can see the potential impact of automation. You can do what if analysis and talk about if we automated these steps within this process, how does that financially benefit the company? Things like that were possible, but very hard. They had to be calculated in a more manual way. ABBYY Timeline provides that as well. And then there's the post monitoring. Once processes have been automated, the timeline can show the value that actually is being realized and also help with things like compliance to make sure certain things are done within processes as they are executed. Absolutely a significant boost, I think, to the world of automation. And I think it will become the standard way companies do automation going forward.
Agreed. And maybe the last thing I'd say is, I think this is what Blue Prism has historically always been very good at, not getting hung up on the hype. There's always been a lot of hype around RPA. And I think what Blue Prism is very good at is coming back to actually making sure it's delivering real outcomes that are scalable for the future. And not those are promising. And it's really the same thing with process mining. This temptation that a couple of years ago, perhaps it was too much hype, that it was some magic pill. But as long as you take the hype out of it, this can really revolutionize how you drive automation across your business. If you're going to invest, actually understand and take a data-led approach in this case. So that's kind of our outlook with it. And the organizations we see that are really successful in doing this take exactly this approach.
Yeah, absolutely. So Neil, I have one final question for you today. What does the future hold for ABBYY? Where do you expect the product to go next?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we have a unique position here with both market-leading IDP and also recognized by Gartner as market-leading for process mining with timelines. So for us, we don't want to be the automation platform. We want to be best at providing the technologies that really underpin and drive success for the automation vendors out there. So we have some pretty exciting plans on our product roadmap that we'll be announcing over the next few months. But at a very basic level, is to be the best in what we currently offer and continue to be the market leaders. It's a simple thing to say, but to maintain that position as a market leader takes a lot of investment and resource and innovation to keep making sure we keep that position. So having already made it to that point, this is still a big part of our focus is to continue to invest and drive innovation across those products. outside of that vision, we want to be the leader, but we also realize that just down even the technology and functional level, there's a lot of different emerging technologies, things like that ChatGPT is brought with generative AI. We have a lot of development going on right now to how better to accommodate those type of technologies, because there's also a lot of hype around those, but they definitely have a part to play over, like, give a couple of examples where we can do some pretty amazing things with IDP, but sometimes you might get images in that are almost unrecognizable to you and me. We try and read it, and there's only so much you can actually do with that type of data coming in. Think of things like doctor's notes, but we can extract a certain level of information from that. And one use case we kind of found that putting that output into ChatGPT to actually make its assessment of what is actually being said here, increase the overall accuracy a huge amount just by noticing trends in what was trying to be said in the text, even though the text is almost unreadable. There's no real words in this particular example I'm thinking of that were printed legibly to even read. So there's a lot of use cases, things like ChatGPT can help infuse into the technologies that we have and others have today. So that's a big part of our kind of exploratory and investment right now to make sure, again, going back to what I earlier said, of really making sure our products not only underpin, but also are interchangeable with all the other emerging and existing technologies out there. So there's a lot more to come from ABBYY on this, but in the short and long term, we want to maintain and continue to be the market leader for both IDP and process mining.
Neil, I really appreciate you being on the podcast today. It's been an interesting discussion, hearing your thoughts on IDP and how it can extend the value of automation, where companies are already using robotic process automation, but now they want to take a step further. They want to go start tackling all of the forms and the paper-based processes that are so dominant within every organization. So I love hearing more about that, about the impact of those two technologies working together. And you've really painted a nice picture for everyone to understand what that looks like. So thank you for being here. I really appreciate it. And I wish you the very best.
Excellent. Thanks, Bryce.
Thanks for tuning in to Transform Now. For more insightful discussions on digital transformation and more, check out our podcast channel where you'll find all of our previous episodes. And to make sure you never miss an episode, subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast player. And if you like what you've heard, please leave us a review. For more information about digital transformation and the future of work, check out blueprism.com to learn how SS&C Blue Prism's digital workforce is enabling enterprise transformation now.